Abram was 75 the first time God came to him with this promise that you just heard, that he would be one day blessed with a son. Abram was 86 when Ishmael was born to Hagar, and perhaps they thought this is what God meant by being gifted a son, that maybe the blessing had arrived. But that was not to be the case, because now Abram's 99 listening to this promise from God again. A son, a great nation, it's still coming. And if my math is mathing, 24 years have passed since the initial promise. 24 years. I don't know how I'd be feeling by this time, but that feels like a really long time. I was thinking this week that it feels a little bit like when I tell my kids, no offense, kids, when I tell my kids that their screen time's done and they respond for like the next 60 minutes with like, I'm almost done, just about finished. It's a lot of promise, but the action feels pretty empty. So I can't pretend to know how those 24 years felt for our now newly named Abraham and Sarah. But I tried to put myself in their shoes this week and imagine. And I spent a fair amount of time trying to come up with something that I waited a long time for. And just so many disclaimers. The example I have is not anywhere close to waiting for the blessing of Isaac. I just want to be clear. It's not deep or meaningful at all. A dishwasher. I waited 34 years for a dishwasher. And I reflected a long time on my long-term desire for a dishwasher. As a kid, I wanted a dishwasher because I had to do all the dishes by hand. I had friends who had dishwashers, and it seemed easier and faster. Doing dishes growing up was generally a job for more than one person. I have lots of memories of someone's washing, someone's drying, someone's putting away, and we always fought over which job we wanted to do and which we didn't. But I remember during those times, I did a lot of explaining to whichever adult was helping, convincing them why we were wasting a lot of time and why a dishwasher would actually be helpful. And at one point in my childhood, my parents actually did a kitchen remodel and did not install a dishwasher. When Dallin and I went to buy our first house, high on my list was a dishwasher. And yet when it came down to price and location and timing, I found myself in a very tiny kitchen that had no space for a dishwasher. And so I washed my dishes by hand over and over. Once Silas and Amelia came along, they were born in that house, there was a permanent chair next to the sink, right, because they were helping me do the dishes. But no worries, this was just our starter home, guys. So we wouldn't be there long. The next house would have a dishwasher. 10 years later, we moved to our current house, and it has a dishwasher. Thank you, I know. I waited a long time for that, guys. And I'm guessing that I actually think about my dishwasher more often than the average person in this room, because I went for a really long time without one. And if the kids complain about like emptying it or filling it, I roll my eyes because they could be hand washing their dishes. Daily, when I start it up and I hear the whirring of that machine, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that sound because those things are all being cleaned without me. So what's my point? My point is that as I waited for this promise of a dishwasher to come, I had a really unique attentiveness to washing dishes. And now, as a proud owner of a dishwasher, I have a very unique attentiveness to washing dishes. And I just wonder if there's some parallel between, held loosely, of course, because it's not the same, guys, I know that. But I wonder if there's a parallel with Sarah and Abraham's promise from God that one day there'd be this entire nation from their lineage, and what attentiveness did their living involve for that 24-year span and beyond. The attentiveness to a promise means that every day could be the day. It's like a new possibility that it might be today. The attentiveness to promise meant staying awake in a different way. The attentiveness to promise meant noticing everything. And the attentiveness to promise meant taking nothing for granted. And this attentiveness to promise means you notice when God gently reminds you that I'm still here, my promise remains. And then for Abraham and Sarah, there was a baby. after 24 years of waiting at last. And I think this is the beauty, because now that there's a baby in their hands after 24 years of waiting, nothing changes really, in the sense that their attentiveness to this promise means they're still staying awake for more than one reason. It means they're noticing everything. It means they're taking nothing for granted. I read somewhere this week that living like this, with this awareness or this attentiveness, is to discover that God is always blessing us. And that certainly seems true in the scripture. In addition to God's promises and covenants, there was a whole lot of blessing going on. Blessings for Hagar, blessings for Ishmael, blessing for Abraham, and this blessing for Sarah. Seems that God was throwing around blessings pretty willy-nilly. And I recognize that blessing can feel complicated for some of us. We live in a very #blessed kind of culture. Vacation, #blessed. 1,000 new followers, #blessed. My conflict-free family, #blessed. Wealth, #blessed. And so this is not that. That's not what I'm talking about. In fact, maybe I'd go so far as to say it's the opposite of that. Kate Bowler is an associate professor of the history of Christianity in North America. That's a long professorship at Duke Divinity School, and as well as an author and a scholar. Anyway, she has done a fair amount of work around the topic of blessings, which culminated actually in co-authoring 2 books on blessings. I'd recommend them. The Lives We Actually Have and Have a Beautiful, Terrible Day. Those are the titles. She writes that #blessed has become one of the most common cultural cliches. But a blessing is more than a flush of gratitude for life's great gifts or a spiritual language for triumph. It's not a thing we just say about something that we already have received. I feel fairly confident that when God told Abraham that I'm going to bless Sarah, I'm going to give her a son, God did not end that little speech by handing Abraham a pillow that said #blessed for their couch, cross-stitched across it, as a parting gift. I don't think that's how it worked, and I don't think that's the point of blessing. Kate Bowler set out to find a language of acknowledgement for the lives we have, not the lives that we wish for. The lives before the dishwasher, the lives before the baby, the lives while we wait around for promises. She says there's a beautiful and instructive language that we can use for naming that strange mix of awful and divine experiences in our lives, and it's the language of blessing. And so down the bunny trail I went of blessing. What is a blessing, and what does it mean that God's so generous with blessings? Can God alone offer blessings? Should we be generous with blessings? Can we offer blessings? Should we offer blessings? I'm not going to answer all those questions today, but there's a few things I want to offer about blessings. First is there's enough blessing to go around. There are so many places in just this biblical story alone where you could start to wonder if someone's going to get left out, right? Like, oh no, now with the birth of Isaac, what does that mean for Ishmael, for example? But there's no scarcity of God's blessing. A blessing here does not mean there won't be a blessing here. Abundant blessings to go around. Stephen B. Chapman is an Old Testament scholar, and he wrote once that the human act of blessing is a means of placing oneself and others within God's good creation and thus participating in God's ongoing work of redemption. I'm going to read that one more time because I didn't do slides for you today. Sorry, guys. He said, the human act of blessing is a means of placing oneself and others within God's good creation and thus participating in God's ongoing work of redemption. That sounded an awful lot like peacemaking to me this week. I think that sometimes we're scared to offer blessings. Like, what words do we use? Do we need to do something to make it official? Can anyone give a blessing? Or just people that are paid to do it? As pastors, we get up here and we offer blessings for babies and parents, kids' Bibles, school kits, people moving away, people starting the Journey program. Could any of you do it? Yeah. There's no magic words and there's no special formula. In fact, a key piece of blessing is recognizing that you've already been beat to it. By that I mean that the holiness is already there. God made all things, all people, and because of that, they all share in God's holiness before and after and during whatever blessing you speak. And that doesn't mean blessings don't matter. It simply means that it simply helps us understand that our blessing does not make something holy, it just names it as holy. Blessing also makes you relax your stance on whether something's good or something is bad. We love to categorize everything, I think. Well, I'll speak for myself. I like to put things in categories. I'd suspect that Abraham and Sarah found it pretty easy to categorize their life experience as well. But when you start embarking on a journey of blessing, you realize pretty quick that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between the two. You could say a blessing when you win the lottery. You could say a blessing when you get a flat tire, and over time you might realize that both are maybe not as good as you thought, and maybe both aren't as bad as you thought. Blessings create this curiosity about ourselves and about the world around us, and it forces us to recognize sacredness in places we thought maybe it couldn't exist. Kate Bowler says, the act of blessing is the strange and vital work of noticing what is true about God and ourselves. And sometimes those truths are awful. She says, like blessed are those who mourn. She says, scripturally it's true. Jesus said it. But does any of that feel true when our worlds are ripped to pieces? No, not really. Or blessed are the poor. Again, it doesn't feel true at all. But in the act of blessing the world as it is and as it should be, we're starting to reassemble what we know. So maybe, God, you're here in the midst of grief, or maybe, God, you can provide for this specific problem. She says, when I bless the actual days I'm living, I suddenly find I have a great deal more to say that's honest. I'm mourning. I'm bored. I'm exhausted. I'm apathetic. She said, I discovered that I'm freed from the need to declare everything #blessed. Good or bad, I don't have to wait to say something spiritually true. I can simply bless it instead. I want to make it clear, blessings don't overlook pain or suffering, or they don't simplify the complexities of life. In many ways, a blessing names what it is without judgment or ruling or verdict. Blessings aren't ignorant, uninformed, or oblivious. They actually recognize that given the choice between a blessing or a curse, a blessing will always do more to discover the divine. Which brings me to this. Pronouncing a blessing moves you closer to God. Whether you like it or not, the practice of blessing forces a lens of compassion over everything. It forces a lens of seeing from a divine perspective. The practice of blessing makes the first move. It moves in, it opens up, and it surrenders to what is rather than what you think it should be. It wouldn't be a Janice sermon if I don't quote Barbara Brown Taylor. I think I'm going to make it my goal for the rest of the year that I have to quote her in every sermon. So I didn't want to disappoint you today because she has a wonderful take on what it means to practice blessing. Judah got me a stick this morning. Judah, thank you. Here's our stick we're going to be blessing. She says this. She said, I think that the best way to discover what pronouncing blessing is to just pronounce a few. The practice itself will teach you what you need to know. Start with anything you like, even a stick laying on the ground. We got our stick. Did you make the stick? No, you did not. The stick has its own story. If you have the time to figure out what kind of tree it came from, that would be a start to showing that stick some respect. It's only a stick in the same way that you are a human, after all. There is more to both of you than that. Is it on the ground because it's old or because it suffered a mishap? Has it been lying there for a long time or did it just land? Is it fat enough for you to see its growth rings? If you look at the stick long enough, you are bound to begin making it a character in your own story. It will begin to remind you of someone you know or a piece of furniture you once saw in a craft co-op. There's nothing wrong with these associations except that they take you away from the stick and back to yourself. To pronounce a blessing on something, it's important to see it as it is. What purpose did this stick serve? Did a bird sit on it? Did it bear leaves that sheltered the ground from the hottest summer sun? At the very least, it participated in the deep mystery of drawing water from the ground, defying the law of gravity to deliver moisture to its leaves. How does a stick do that, especially one this size? Smell it. Is the scent of sap still there? This is no less than the artery of a tree that you're holding in your hand. Its tissue has come from the sun and from the earth. Put it back where you found it, and it will return back into earth again, dust to dust and ashes to ashes. But will you say a blessing first? No one can hear you, so you may say whatever you like. And then she offers 3 examples. Bless you, stick, for being you. Blessed are you, O stick, for turning dirt and sun into wood. Blessed are you, Lord God, for using this stick to stop me in my tracks. The most ordinary things can be drenched in divine possibility. Anyone can ask and anyone can bless. Ask for a blessing, offer a blessing, whether anyone has authorized you to do it or not, or consider this your authorization. All I'm saying is that the world needs you to do this because there's a shortage of people willing to kneel wherever they are and recognize the holiness holding its sometimes bony, often tender, always life-giving hand above their heads. That we are able to bless one another at all is evidence that we have been blessed, whether we can remember when or not. And that we are willing to bless one another is a miracle enough to stagger the stars. To live in hope of a promise is to discover that God is always blessing us. The blessing and the promises of God are now. I acknowledge it might not be fully realized, it might not be fully in hand, but I do think we're called to live with this laughing hope in God's promise today. I think the gift of Genesis 17 is this reminder that at the center of our very being is blessing and promise, naming and covenant. And my prayer for us this week is that we offer blessings generously, willy-nilly, extravagantly. I wanted to offer you a blessing that I'm going to steal from Kate Bowler. Music team, you're welcome to come up. And I picked a blessing that I thought maybe Sarah and Abraham could relate to, and perhaps the rest of us can as well. This is a blessing for when you're waiting. God, here we wait, where the air is still and presses in upon all possibility, here in this waiting room with all the others, waiting for a diagnosis or for test results, waiting for them to make a decision or my heart to finally know, for that letter in the mail or the headline to break, for the loved one refusing to change, or the child to find happiness at last. God, here we wait, in a place where fear and anger and frustration come so easily, and the simplest decisions seem to take forever, where we're reminded once again that so little is in our control. God, come and help us. We need something, someone, to make a difference. We long for good news, not the anticipation of realized fear we know too well. Bring that ridiculous miracle, the phone call or news, the decision or the resolution. But if it doesn't, God, bless this place where love becomes the air we breathe, even here in the waiting room.